Mr. Rick Molek, and pardon me if I butchered that, Rick.
It's all right.
All right, but he is a gardener and teacher for the micro nursery Thrifty Garden. But thank you for joining us today. So we'll hand the meeting over.
Thanks for having me. My name is Rick Molek. It doesn't matter how you say it. It's all right, Clifford, no problem. I run Thrifty Garden here at the Butterfly Estates, downtown Fort Myers. And our mission, main for being, is to make gardening affordable and accessible. We can't always do that on the plants and products that we sell, though we try. But the biggest thing is for information and classes like this, where we're talking about weeds and wildflowers that can be free if you know what you're looking for. It brings me personal great joy to introduce somebody to basically nature's free plants, especially when you're already interested in conservation or preserving pollinator species or getting into butterfly gardening. A little bit of knowledge on weeds and wildflowers can really set you up for an almost free or entirely free garden, which is a little bit funny to say as somebody who runs a garden shop. We don't exist if you don't buy some plants from us, but it really is the biggest thing. Florida has such a diverse population of all kinds of species of wildflowers. Some are endemic to the state, some are shared with the lower southeastern part of the United States. The ones that are more unique to Florida are crazy looking, and also often are pulled or sprayed really quickly because we don't have enough information about them to know their benefits and just not have connected those pieces. So a class like this is actually one of my favorite ones, even though we do sell some of them, but most of the ones that we're talking about, well, that's not entirely true. We're only going to talk about like 8 or 9 tonight. There's so many more that are available in our area, but are not commercially available. The ones that we're going to talk about tonight, you should be able to identify some of them. Not always commercially available. You won't find them at like big box stores for sure. You will find them at some of our native nurseries or local nurseries. But also, most likely I've seen them in your yard or in undeveloped properties as you drive around in your neighborhood, maybe even in your own yard. Some of these I first met as volunteers in my garden and only learned about them afterwards, but have come to appreciate all of them for various reasons. So this is one of the classes that we do. We also do classes on Florida gardening, butterfly gardening, composting, kitchen sprouting. How we have the Florida Native Butterfly Society, which runs the Butterfly Conservatory. Their mission is to raise and release Florida Native butterflies. We have an art gallery, art shop, and a restaurant. So being a little bit more of an attraction, we have some other things as well in the shop. And if I don't bore you to death. All right, so this is our Weeds and Wildflowers class. Like I said, there's a very small sample of what you might find in the area. Some of my favorites, all of the ones that we're going to talk about tonight, are in bloom right now in our test garden. The pictures that you're going to see are from our test garden on the property. Actually, I think all of them taken today or within the last week or so. To give you a more realistic example, if you're in this area, of things that you can grow and do here, which is kind of important to us. I find even when I'm trying to buy for the shop retail books or resources, it's really hard to get good resources for this area. It's such a unique place, and it doesn't seem like a lot of people spend a lot of time or money just focusing on this area, because we can grow a lot of stuff here. We don't fit all of the rules, but we have such a diversity of species and plants and animal life. It's a lot of fun. My favorite thing about this topic is I took, which we're not going to really go into tonight, but I took a foraging class a couple of years ago, and it made me look at weeds in a whole different way. Even if I'm not going to eat them, even if I don't want to grow them, it forever changed my mind. Just knowing that something has another purpose or a potential purpose or benefit to me has forever changed how I approach my garden. I won't pull it if I don't know what it is. I have to find out first. And I hope that something along those lines happens for you. If you already know all of this stuff, I hope that I don't bore you to death. So now we'll move on to the actual plants that I want to talk about tonight. Very small sampling. This particular one in the picture at the moment, which I'm not sure I can. I think that's okay. The railroad vine is in bloom, so I didn't include it in the slide, but that's the plant that you see to the right of me, which is also my better side. Thank God for Zoom. I put this as the, let's see if I can move this. Oops, sorry. All right. So want to introduce you to some of our local weeds and wildflowers. Quick side note on that, I don't really use the word weed. It's probably get asked that question every single day at the shop. Is that a weed? People will show me pictures or point out specimens I have in the test garden or in potted plants we have. And a weed, the word weed is an arbitrary term. It means nothing. People have different definitions of it. All are fine, useful, whatever. A plant that's growing where you don't want it to grow seems suitable enough for me because even if it's a prize specimen, if it's breaking your foundation, it's certainly weedy, invasive to you. It doesn't really matter what its other benefits are. But I generally dislike the term because most plants have evolved with our wildlife, with our species, to have some benefit. So I included this picture as the first one. We'll talk about this particular plant a little bit later. This is the Florida state wildflower, Coreopsis tickseed, and it is growing in the crack of pavers right outside of my back door here, where I am displaying pots that are probably $60 to $90, but I can't pull this up. I have planted it before and it hasn't come up. I've had it reseed. Nature's funny and does what it wants, and I leave it alone when it does stuff cool like this. But anyway, we'll talk about some of the benefits of the wildflowers and hope that you leave with something you didn't know before, or at least increased appreciation for some of our native wildflowers. One of my favorite authors ever. I was so glad to find he had written at least a sentence on a weed and not even marijuana. This is completely made up. There's no scientific background to my order of this, and I couldn't get the PowerPoint to do two connected. So there's 5 and 5 equals 10. Doesn't really matter. I pulled this all out of my own head. It's completely arbitrary.
I like the last one.
Yeah, me too. The first one is probably what we should focus on, but there's all kinds of benefits for either intentionally using weeds and wildflowers in your landscape, or at least allowing them where you can. Doesn't all have to be a completely manicured thing. It doesn't have to be a purchased thing. But if you can have some disturbed areas of your yard that you let go wild, that will be better than not having it at all. Some of the wildflowers we have around here, or at least could have around here, are going to be hard to find, depending on where you live. You live in an area maybe like Cape Coral, where certain plants may have just kind of been eliminated from the area. You would have to introduce it into your yard to see it. But that doesn't mean that's true for everything, but it can cost nothing. Some of them are host plants for butterflies, moths. Some of them provide cover crop for other wildlife, some shelter or fruit for birds, things that have evolved together without our help. I'm not so much a purist on natives or an extremist. We're also a species that lives on the planet. Nature migrates, we do things, whatever. But we're able to see and know the effects of our movements. So when we can balance that out, I think it's a good thing. So if you're already planting a garden or are expanding a garden, you want to do something else, a good thing to consider, in my opinion, is to try to include some of the native species that we may have pushed either far away from the area or maybe even to the brink of extinction. So if we can try to balance out our movements, I think is a good thing. One of my favorite qualities of Weeds and Wildflowers is being able to answer to somebody if they can't grow anything. If you didn't mow your lawn for 2 weeks, you would find out that you can grow all kinds of things, maybe just not what you wanted or not what you think you want, but there's plenty that's growing already in your yard. You just don't know what it is yet. You haven't fallen in love with it, you didn't choose it, so you don't know that you can actually grow anything. But if you let your yard go wild for a couple of weeks, you would find out that you're a pretty good gardener after all. Some of the wildflowers and weeds that we'll talk about are actually edible. There's only one that I actually really like, but that's a personal thing.
Which one is it?
We'll get to that for sure. On the
Okay.
So I have two number fives. 5 and 5 is 10. The second number 3 can add beauty and a unique look. One of the problems that I think we come up against with weeds and wildflowers is we find them growing singularly somewhere where they're kind of a nuisance. Sometimes they're hard to pull out, sometimes they're just really inconvenient. And that's unfortunate because if you could imagine, or you let yourself imagine a flower bed of them, that changes them forever. If you can see them grouped together in an intentional planting, it really changes everything about that plant. But growing in an inconvenient place can change our thoughts on that. When I give butterfly gardening classes, I strongly encourage people to use the native weeds and wildflowers already in their yard, just to wait to see what butterflies come along before they start investing in specific host plants that might be $30 vines or $100 trees or something like that. Find out who's coming to visit already, and then make your decision before you start. Because not everybody can let their yard go crazy, unfortunately. So it is my favorite way to garden. So the first plant that we'll talk about, these are in no particular order of importance or anything. I think I put them in alphabetical order by common name, or the common name that I chose, because I'm sure you probably know plants can have multiple common names, which makes it hard to identify them. I've included the scientific or botanical name underneath, but the common name I chose, we're just going by alphabetical order. So this
Do
is
you
blanket.
sell Gaillardia?
I'm sorry?
You sell
Yes.
Gaillardia?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Blanket flower or Indian blanket flower or Indian paintbrush, it's also known as. A lot of the ones that we're going to go through tonight are not really good potted plants. If you find them at local nurseries, sometimes they look really gnarly, as even here. They just don't really do well in nursery potting media, but they really do thrive in our native soil. They can handle the sandiness, they can handle drought conditions, they can handle flood conditions. Not all of them all the same, but generally speaking, they can thrive in our area just fine. They don't look their best in nursery pots. So if you ever get a chance to buy any of these, don't be deterred just because they don't look their best. They don't make really good potted plants. Most of them are really good self-seeders, so they'll flower, they'll drop their seed. If you have an area where they can keep doing that, you'll be rewarded every year with more and more of them, which I strongly encourage. but you may find them at nurseries, including here, where they just don't look like what you're expecting for a potted flower or something like that, if you can find them at all. But this is blanket flower. Also have a variety of it. I don't know where it came from, but it's in our test garden. That's all yellow. The petals are all yellow. It was here last year, and now it's like 3 times as many this year. So I keep expanding its zone and protecting it so it keeps filling out. Hopefully next year I have a whole corner where it's just stunning. The Naples Botanical Garden has a beautiful, out in the parking lot, beautiful mound of this. This is blue porterweed. This is an edible. The flowers are edible. It is actually probably my favorite one. It's just it's kind of a pain. I don't know that the leaves are edible, but the flowers taste like mushrooms. Just even a little bit of it tastes like a mushroom, and it really is good. You would just need a lot of it to do anything with. So I have sampled a couple of flowers, and I love that I know it tastes like mushrooms, and every once in a while, just for fun, I'll have a bit, but it's such a tiny flower that you're not going to have a dinner party where that's the featured ingredient. But good to know, I guess, that you can eat
I
it.
have a lot of it.
Oh, there you go.
Volunteers all over my yard. It's quite
Good.
invasive.
It will, for
In
sure.
my yard, anyway.
Yeah, no, it's native. This one really likes to be in a wet area. So you would find it naturally along the river or ponds in low areas where it stays wet pretty much most of the time. Its growth comes up from rhizomes under the ground and will spread that way. So if you have a wet area of your yard, it would be a good plant for that. Or where we don't normally recommend potting plants in a pot with no drainage or little drainage, this would be one where you'd say, go ahead and do it because it's naturally inclined to sit in water. So you could get away with a big pot that doesn't drain very well, where we most of the time would say, don't plant something in a pot like that. This one actually could do it. Flowers most of the year with this crazy looking, one of my favorites, mimosa sensitive plant, Mimosa strigolosa. This one flowers on and off all year long. Each flower lasts about a day. Every time I look at one of these flowers, I think of some Dr. Seuss book I read. Don't know which one. I think it just kind of blurs in the average in my memory, but it's the craziest looking flower I think I've ever seen.
It does. It looks like Horton Hears a Who.
Yeah, and it looks almost fiber optic at the end. There's all this, every little end of it has some kind of different colored piece to it that looks like it's like fiber optic, and each flower stem lasts one day. Tomorrow, well, actually by the end of, I think I took this picture this morning, by this afternoon, this particular flower looked like the one to the right. So
I
each
have
one-
them in my yard, but I only have them in spring.
Okay.
And they're
Yeah,
small. They're about this tall.
Yeah, this one gets a little bit higher, and it's
Oh.
possible you have a different one, but
Yeah.
it's probably this. There's a one looks very similar to this. It's related, Mimosa pudica, that comes from, well, it's all, I don't know where it comes from, but it's also in Puerto Rico, and it has thorns on it, but it
Oh,
looks
no.
very similar. That's the same thing.
Mhm.
And there's, I think, 2 varieties that are around here, but this is the one that you would see mostly. The property across the street from us, part of the one half of the front yard is full of this. It still has grass in it, but when it's in bloom, it's really stunning to look at. Mist flower, this is a, oops, sorry, went too fast. Picture doesn't really show the blueness very well, but
No.
this is such a favorite of butterflies and bees. This is one that I saw pop up in my yard, never heard of it, never seen it before. I found it in an area I had worked heavily, and just took like a week or so break, and this popped up in a path. I had no idea what it was. It is a native wildflower. The bees and butterflies love it. The flower is much more blue than the picture shows, but the leaves are, before it flowers, you wouldn't recognize it. So it'd be something that people can be inclined to pull up or spray because it doesn't look like grass or whatever else you planted in the area, which is unfortunate because it's such a good pollinator-friendly plant. Easy to pull up too. When it's done, it pulls up so easily, and it'll have already seeded for next year or next couple of weeks. Very low maintenance that way. Doesn't have a huge taproot. It pulls up very nice. So you can let it go until it looks ugly and pull it with minimal effort.
Rick, which is the foliage associated with the mist flower? I can't really tell because you've got 3 different things
I
growing.
know. And unfortunately, I'm sorry. I don't know. Can you see my mouse or no?
Yeah, I thought that was
Okay.
Biden's. But that's a mist flower? Okay.
I believe it's the mist flower.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't have this one actually was a volunteer where I wouldn't have wanted it, but it was the best specimen for today, I think, when I took the picture. So I had to kind of get where I could get it. But that's a very good question, and I'm sorry, because I do believe it's that, because if you look over here, it looks kind of the same. But that's the thing with the wildflowers. Like, you could have this growing for 10 years in your yard. If you never let it get this high, you would never know it was there. You could just mow it. Even if you're not spraying or pulling or whatever, you would never know it was there, which I think is what happened in my case. And it is unfortunate because we never get to see the benefits of it. And if you're trying to do anything like vegetable gardening or fruits or anything, tomatoes especially, you need as many pollinators as you can possibly get. And there are some things that the bees especially just love. So the Biden's elbow, which we haven't talked about yet, but that's over here, and the mist flower, they love it. And it's all over the place. Unfortunately, there's more ways you can buy stuff to kill it than you can purchase it to put it in your yard. But the pollinators just love it. It's perfect for them. Out of all the things I have in the test garden, this is what they go to the most: the Biden's alba and the mist flower. They're all over it, which is why for the first time ever, I think I got 8 tomatoes this year off of one plant. So I think my record before that was 1 that I could eat, but I was loaded with Biden's alba and the mist flower this year. This one is another one, very, very nondescript until it gets very big. In most planned landscapes, I think I have 10 more minutes. I think we're doing okay. You really wouldn't notice this. I got this picture really close, but each one of these petals is, I don't know, maybe a 1/5 the size of a dime. I mean, it's very, very tiny. That's it. That's the showiest part of it. But if you were standing back from it, you wouldn't really even notice it. The leaves are nondescript. This is the showiest part. This is pepper grass. It's native to Florida, but not endemic to Florida. So you can find it up through the southeast, maybe the eastern seaboard. Called pepper grass because you can actually use these pods as pepper. So edible to us. Not a very strong flavor, but not bad at all. And when it gets taller, it produces a lot of these, and it dries out very quickly, and you could take all of those, grind them up, and use them as pepper.
Are these the very, very flat, those
Yes.
things? Oh,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
I have them. I call them Indian pepper, so it's the same thing.
Okay.
All right, cool.
And
I've
also,
I've heard them called poor man's pepper.
Ah,
poor man's pepper is another name for them. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a host plant. I'm sorry, I can't remember the butterfly, the that it's a host plant for, but it is a host plant for a native butterfly. So if you're already thinking along those lines of, you know, stabilizing native populations, things like that, you see something like this, you want to protect it and preserve it and let it do some more in your yard, because people aren't buying this. They're not specifically planting it. So the only time this is going to grow is accidentally in the little bit of remaining wild spots that we have. So when you see it, it's a good thing. Leave it alone if you can. You'll have it year round. This is the time of year where it does the best, but it does grow year round. And to that point, I want to go back for a second. Mimosa is also a host plant. And I'm sorry, I'm in a zone for wildflowers and I'm forgetting my butterfly information, but this is a host plant for, I think, the dainty sulfur butterfly. And if you don't already know, the host plant is the plant on which the adult female butterflies will lay their eggs, because the caterpillars require that plant to eat, to grow, and then form their chrysalis. So without that plant, they would perish. There would be no more.
I have Dutchman's pipevine,
Mhm.
and my Dutchman's pipevine does the whole thing for the pipevine swallowtail. Everything. Eggs are laid, the caterpillars are chewing it, and the butterflies are all over it.
Yep.
Yep.
So
And the chrysalis, all of it. Yeah.
the rest of these were nectar plants for pollinators, but the mimosa, the peppergrass so far are also host plants. I mean, some species of butterflies will lay their eggs on it, and they require that to continue their generations. This is scorpion tail, not the best picture, but this is what it looked like today. And sorry, very, very tiny, tiny flowers. In person, it is a little bit better, but not much. The flowers, kind of like the porterweed, they won't always be full down the spike, but if you look up close, you'll see very, very tiny, delicate, ornate flowers, but mostly not all the way down. Very big favorite of bees and smaller butterflies. They can access the nectar very easily. Not very showy, very hard to pull up if it gets established in your yard. It's a native, so I don't necessarily recommend pulling it up, but it can grow up in the cracks of your walkways and stuff like that, and it becomes a pain in the ass to pull out. It's very hard to do. So I like it. I let it go where I can, but when it gets too far, it is a little bit annoying. But it's really nice. Goes up to about 3 feet, and in a grouping, it's a really nice wildflower. Here's the Biden's alba. Most of the time in our butterfly gardening class, I get a 50-50 response to this. I love this plant so much. Also hate it for some reasons, and same reasons everybody else does. This back here, when it goes to seed, the Spanish needle part of it is the seed. That's what sticks to your sock. I have thrown away socks when they were too overwhelmed with it. I wasn't gonna pick them all off. But also edible to us, not a lot of taste. Bees absolutely love this plant so much. I purposely keep a patch of it. Not sure it's the best business idea I've ever done, but as you walk up into our main entryway, you'll see a lot of this. The property owner,
Which part is edible? The flower?
the flower, yeah.
Huh.
I don't know if the leaves are, but I know that the flowers are. And they don't have a lot of taste. So it's one of the things that, because I know it, makes me love it a little bit more and not so angry when I get this part on my sock. So the fact that I know I could eat it, all right, I guess you can live. But any time of the day you walk out into our test garden, you will see bees all over this. And out of all the other things that we plant purposely for pollinators, this is one I wouldn't have planted You cannot buy it commercially. Sometimes we have it, but nobody's producing it commercially. You can buy plenty of things to kill it. You can pull it up, but the bees absolutely love it, and it's worth having just for that. Very easy to keep in control. It pulls up easy. Hard to get rid of in the sense of you're never going to eliminate it. If it's established in your yard, you're never going to eliminate it probably without herbicide or something like that, which I'm not recommending. But it does seed rapidly. But it's easy to, you can mow it down, you can pull it up. It has a wide spread, but you can get down to the main stalk of it and pull out like a 3-foot spread of it in 5 seconds. So I encourage people to do it, to let it be, but it can be a little bit of a nuisance. It is fast growing, it self-seeds rapidly, but it's a very, very big favorite of the pollinators.
It's not easy to tame. It's not easy to keep orderly. You have to kind of embrace, you have to embrace chaos.
Yeah, it depends on how you have it set up. Like how I have it right now, I have to go in between, because I have it in between plantings. In my old house, I would have rows of it where I just let that be it. And so I would weed whack it down and throw the clippings back on it and built up mounds. And that was where I left it, and it looked great and it served its purpose. Right now where I have it here, it's in between all kinds of plantings, so we selectively weed when it gets a little bit leggy and starts going to seed. So I'm not saying it's suitable for every application, and it can be a pain in the ass, but it's still something that should be considered because it's such a good food for the pollinators, and it just, where nothing else will grow, this will do it. So and the bees love it. So no matter what else I plant out there. So I think this is the main reason why I got 8 or 9 tomatoes this year, was because I let Biden's alba grow all around it just fine. I think they got to the tomatoes just by accident, really. If I didn't have these here, I don't think they would have come. That's just anecdotal, but that's what I believe. And then here's the tick seed. This is one of my favorite things, not my favorite picture of all time, but my favorite ideas of the Weeds and Wildflowers. Like I alluded to before, I can't grow anything. This is supposed to be a, not fancy, we don't really do anything fancy here at Thrifty Garden, but fancier display as you walk up to our entrance. This is on the back side of it, so I missed it for a little bit. But we have nice pots on top of those cinder blocks. Supposed to be a nice display, letting you know that we sell stuff and whatever. And this grew up, I don't know, I don't think I've ever had tick seed on this display, but the seeds got there anyway. And so I love these things because when you come and say, I'd love to have a garden, but I can't grow anything. Here's a plant that's saying, take me home, I'll do it for you. Because look, I just found this crack in the sidewalk and I'm growing just fine. So I love that. If you can just expand your mind a little bit, maybe that wasn't the plant you were thinking of, but you definitely can grow that. Even if you have concrete, you can grow tick seed apparently. Tropical sage, very much the same. Not a very long-lived plant, each individual plant, but a rapid reseeder. So perfect plant for maybe along a fence or an area you're not going to get to for a year or two. It can be a messy area, it can be a sandy area. You just want to see something growing. You want to attract butterflies, but it could be in an area that you're just not going to get to for a little while. You could just scratch out the grass, plant 1 or 2 of these, and you'll have salvia forever. When it grows in clumps together, it looks amazing. Each one is fine too, but when the singular plant, if you just had one, when it goes to seed, it does look like a weed, or what we think of as a weed. But if you can give it some room to grow, very stunning collection of wildflowers that could mimic something along the lines of like an English garden look, which a lot of people also ask us about.
No
Clifford,
problem.
we have the
Yeah.
Florida Native Plant Society, and you could probably email a picture to those
Mhm.
people. They're very pleasant and are interested in helping people.
Or
Okay.
have,
have an
or have Connie come
application.
over.
That
I
is a
have
good.
an application that you take a picture, but don't trust this application
trust.
so much.
Oh,
Don't
yeah, but
trust.
you
Yeah,
can ask the
sometime-
Native Plant.
Sometimes I
people.
took a picture. Yeah, sometimes I took a picture of my dog and he said it was a rat. So, but this, it looks like a rat.
Same thing. I paid, I think, $10 for an app, and to prove it, I'm not saying I get the like scientist of the year award or anything, but to prove that it worked, before I used it to tell customers something, I took like 10 plants that I knew the name of. Every single one of them was wrong on the app.
No.
Garbage. Yeah, every single one of them.
Did you get your
Oh.
money
I
back?
won't recommend the app then.
Yeah, because if you don't know, that you would have no way of measuring it, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Well, not no way, but you would have to go do more work and say, okay, you know, go search it somewhere else, this name, and find out whether it's maybe that's a young version of it, old version, whatever. Anyway, we have a lot of good resources. If you're in Lee County, there's plenty of garden clubs. We have native nurseries, master gardeners. The extension service is a fantastic resource. There are some printed materials that can help with that. Little bit hard if you are just meeting that plant the first time in your yard. And so like an app sounds like a miracle, and when we can get that technology to work right, that would be fantastic. But I would say if you're really interested in that, classes like this, or butterfly gardening, or local gardening groups where they're talking about things where people have already experienced these plants in the yard, you take a cutting of it, go to a meeting, go to a nursery that does this kind of stuff and ask them about it, is, I would say, your best likelihood of success in getting a good identification. And then, is this a good plant that I should allow here, or is it something I should pull up? Because we haven't even talked about, all of the ones we talked about today were native. When I give this class in person, which by the way, we're doing Saturday morning, the full class, with including the tour of the test garden. Login is on the Eventbrite link there. But you'd want to probably show it to somebody, talk to them. If you're coming from that perspective that you shared with us, with no knowledge of it, you'd want to get somebody who has seen it, probably researched it already, whatever. So otherwise, it could just as easily be an invasive species that has a pollinator benefit, but we shouldn't plant. So just because it's a weed doesn't mean that you should leave it alone. Not trying to make this overly complicated, but better if you find somebody who's been gardening around here for a while, or the extension service, garden club, something like that. So we do have some printed material that is available for this far south, but I'll be honest, it's not that great. We have a lot of things that can grow here that maybe shouldn't be growing here. So it's hard to develop a guide, or that's what my guess is.
Right.
We don't really have good encyclopedias of Southwest Florida plants, because stuff from Southeast Asia, from India, from Mexico can grow here just fine and never let you know that it shouldn't be here. Some of it can be damaging to our environment. Some of it can be just fine and well behaved. But if you're just starting, you probably want to tap into some kind of local resource that maybe has been doing it a little bit longer to guide you. I hope that didn't make a ridiculous, complicated answer to your question.
What I get
No.
Is the
suggestion.
is the store open like it says on my Google? It says it's open 10 to 7 every day.
It is, yes.
Okay.
And actually right now, because I needed to be on time for this, so I couldn't lock the doors ahead of time. So we're still open right now.
Are you there most days?
I work a full-time day job, but I work remotely upstairs. But we have a fantastic staff.
Yeah,
uh,
okay.
People that would love to help you with anything and
I'm
chat
gonna
with you.
come, I had Gaillardia for many years, and this is the first year none of them popped up.
Huh.
So I want to buy some more.
Oh, okay.
So I'll be by to buy.
Okay, we'll look forward to that.
One group that you can possibly go to, Cape Coral has an organization called Cape Coral Friends of Wildlife. And they have a number of different issues that they talk about on a month-by-month basis. They meet the second Tuesday of each month. And they do have master gardeners in the group. So you can go there and get, at least if nothing else, plants identified that you can't figure out what you've got in your yard.
Excellent.
Warren, maybe you can get somebody from that organization to speak.
I'll make a good shot at it.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Rick. It was wonderful.
Yes,
My
that was
pleasure.
very
Thank you.
informative, Rick. I had not
Clifford.
heard of, I've seen many of those plants because my office is over there. Or, well, what I use the office over there at the Butterfly Estates. But I didn't know the names of anything. So that was very interesting from my standpoint. And I think we have a lot of gardeners and master gardeners that can really take advantage of what the Thrifty Garden is actually providing and everything. So do you have any more shameless plugs that you'd like to put out? Any events coming up? Anything else major?
We do a plant swap every Saturday. So not a shameless plug because it doesn't really make us any money, but it's a lot of fun that it exists. So during our opening hours on Saturdays from 10 to 7, you can bring a plant, a used pot, seedlings, seeds, a cutting, whatever, and take what somebody else has left behind for the plant swap. Just as a fun thing to do.
Just
Not
a
a
free
pl-
swapping thing?
Yeah, it's not a formal planned thing, so you may
Yeah.
or may not see somebody else out there. It's just a passive. We have a dedicated space for it, but it's fun to see what people bring, and sometimes you find something that you don't even know about, so you wouldn't buy it if you encountered it at a store, but you're bringing something you have too much of, and you get to take something home. Minimal risk.
Yeah.
So
Michael
that's
has a
fun. We do that every Saturday, 10 to 7. Otherwise, I mean, I feel like I've been charming enough, Clifford. I don't need to do shameless plugs. Everybody should
You have
be
been
just coming
wonderful.
and swarming the place.
Yeah, well, everybody go see him in person. He's got a wonderful smile and that charming disposition.
Michael, did you have a question?
No, yeah. Rick, thank you so much again for coming tonight. And it's been far too long since I popped on over. I'm actually in Jacksonville right now, of all places. So for the last couple of weeks, I've been in Jacksonville. But anyways, I just wanted to see if you have any thoughts on have you heard of this TV series by chance called Flip My Family Yard? Is that something that you've ever come across?
No, but I like the idea of it. Tell me more.
Oh, it's interesting. They go to these Florida yards and they try and install native landscaping and stuff like that, native plants and whatnot. So that way it's not as water intensive, not as fertilizer intensive as well, or the grass like that. And maybe I'm not sure. Maybe you could ever find a willing landowner, willing homeowner in the area who want to try and flip their yard, right? And collaborate with you all.
Absolutely could. What's funny is that's like a very sounds like anyway. And when you're back in town, please come back and visit because I'd love to talk to you about it. That would be really fun. It sounds like the more popular or pop culture version of what the Extension Service does with the Florida friendly yards.
It is run by
that
Florida
same
Yards.
thing.
It is, yeah. So it is a grant recipient of Florida Friendly Landscaping and also DEP's grants as well. So, but it is definitely the pop culture version of that. And I don't know. I think obviously folks on the call know that in Lee County we have a strict urban fertilizer ordinance in place. That's blackouts for months of June through I want my blank right now. June through
September.
October, right? September.
Yep.
Thank you, Connie. Yeah, it's October for September 30th, October 1st, one is two. But I think sometimes enforcement is sometimes the most difficult thing with any sort of urban fertilizer ordinance. And obviously, if you have these programs around having more Florida friendly landscaping and also things that are less yard intensive for your grasses, it can be a good educational opportunity, I think, for folks.
I agree.
So
I would say, I mean, there's multiple reasons for what I'm going to say next, and I caught the tail end of your meeting, and I'm not trying to jump into that stuff, but I actually do believe, for multiple reasons, that education is probably. I'm sorry if I'm making you dizzy, but I'm going outside because I'm going to smoke a cigarette. I think education is actually the more productive way of getting those points across. You can, for example, pass legislation about fertilizer use and whatever, but I will say, being in the industry, we don't add a lot of fertilizer. We don't add any to outside plants at all, but the plants that we get from Florida growers that are under the same restrictions come loaded with fertilizer, and that goes right in your yard. So we do sell fertilizer for houseplants. That goes nowhere though. That doesn't go into your yard or anything. We don't even really recommend it unless the plant needs it. But as a matter of course, for your outside, we don't sell it. We don't even do composted cow manure. We don't recommend it. It's not scientifically sound. So you can pass whatever laws you want, but if you're not going to get at the core of the thing, where every plant you buy from any nursery anywhere in the state of Florida is loaded with a cup of fertilizer that you're going to put in your yard, if you're not getting to that, then it's not enough. Better, I think, not that you necessarily asked me this, but better the education, better that we one-on-one every single time communicate that that's not necessary. If you pick the right plant and put it in the right place and you have some best practices for caring for it, you won't even notice a need for fertilizer. I would prefer that than any legislation that would be passed, because there's going to be an endless amount of things that can pop up that replace whatever that you're banning, which is equally as bad environmentally. So if you're after the end goal of stopping the thing, education has to be, my opinion, humble as it is, has to be the number one thing. The legislation is maybe essential sometimes, but there's too many ways of it being ignored or bypassed for it to actually be.
With that said, we'll go ahead and call the meeting adjourned. It's what, 8:02? 8:01.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Rick, for the everyone have a great
Thanks for
night.
having me. Bye, everybody.
Bye.